All rise. Court is now in session. I'm Judge T. Thomas Cooper presiding.
All right. Thank you. Be seated. This matter of State versus William Lewis, I have the defendant's filed a motion to exclude certain testimony. Mr. Wise, you may proceed.
Your Honor, in discussions with Solicitor Brackett over the past several weeks, it's agreed that he is proceeding on count one of the indictment only, which one will greatly shorten the trial. But in count one of the indictment, the state has alleged that Mr. Lewis did, from the day he took office through April 24th of 2017, misuse public resources and abuse the power and authority of the office for purposes of facilitating an adulterous relationship in breach of his duties of good faith and accountability to the public. In reviewing the discovery in this case, Your Honor, particularly the deposition of what I would call the complaining witness, there are allegations by her that an alleged rape took place in Charlotte, North Carolina. Our first motion is that events that took place in Charlotte, North Carolina are not germane to an indictment that alleges that the events took place in Greenville, South Carolina, and they should be excluded on that basis. The second part of the motion is that if the court deems that events in Charlotte are admissible, that the indictment does not give me any notice that he's going to use any allegation of rape as a basis for finding misconduct on behalf of Will Lewis. He's never alleged there's any criminal sexual conduct crime committed by Mr. Lewis in the indictment. The indictment simply refers to an adulterous relationship. Any other criminal evidence would be clearly not admissible under 404B and would clearly be more prejudicial and probative under 403. And therefore, since he could have, had he wanted to, said the misconduct in office is an alleged rape that occurred, or criminal sexual conduct, first, second, or third degree. He did not. He alleged only an adulterous affair, which certainly would not put any defendant on notice that criminal sexual conduct of any degree occurred. It is in the discovery, and I don't think it would be admissible in the wording of this indictment.
Right.
Please report, Your Honor. The indictments that we'll be proceeding on are 2018 GS 23-2466 and 2019 GS 23-1146, count A of these two indictments. There are common law misconduct in office and statutory misconduct in office, and we would be proceeding on count A of both of them. Count A reads
On which one?
on 2466, 2018 2466, Your Honor.
All right.
William D. Lewis did, from the date he took office through April 24, 2017, willfully misuse public resources and abuse the power and authority of his office for the corrupt purpose of pursuing or facilitating an adulterous relationship in breach of his duties of good faith and accountability to the public. The other indictment, count A, reads, William D. Lewis did, from the date he took office through April 24, 2017, misuse public resources and abuse the power and authority of his office for the corrupt purpose of pursuing or facilitating an adulterous relationship. Now, Mr. Wise has put forward two objections, the first of which I think is the easiest to deal with summarily, alleging that events took place in another state, therefore they cannot be admissible.
Any other jurisdiction?
Well, I'm sorry? Yeah, in any other jurisdiction, yes. I think clearly, Your Honor, the defendant owed a duty to the people of Greenville. And he could have breached that duty anywhere he went when it came to misusing public funds. If he had taken the company credit card to Las Vegas and spent $10,000 gambling and drinking and having fun, all of that would have occurred in Las Vegas, but he owed a duty to the people back here to use that money as it was supposed to be used, and he did not. So the location of where he breached his duty to the people of Greenville is irrelevant. And I think that the conduct that took place in Charlotte is entirely appropriate to be proven to establish that he violated the law. So that's
Well,
essentially.
Mr. Wise is relying on the last penultimate paragraph of the indictment, which says this committed this crime, William D. Lewis committed this crime in Greenville County, all in violation of Section 8180 of the Code.
Yes, sir. He committed the crime because the crime itself is violating the trust of the public in Greenville County. Where he violated that trust doesn't matter. The public's trust in Greenville was violated by his conduct in Charlotte.
All right. How about second prong of his argument?
The second prong of his argument, Your Honor, I think he couches it in terms of a 404B analysis. And I think, Your Honor, more appropriately should analyze this issue under res gestae. In order to...
Tell me what it is. Sorry.
What his argument is?
No, what the evidence is that you seek to introduce.
When the defendant, I was going to ask the court to give me a moment, and
Right.
I was going to basically, and it will take a moment for me to do this.
Go ahead.
It'll take more than a moment. I don't think, and I don't know how much background information you have about the facts of this case.
Not a lot.
Not a lot is what I expected. And so what I think I need to do in order for you to understand why the events that transpired in Charlotte are part of the res gestae of the general case, you need to have an understanding, a more comprehensive understanding of the facts. So I'd like to summarize those for the court now to the greatest extent possible. They transpired over a period of about 9 or 10 months. So it'll take a little bit, but I want to kind of inform the court a little bit of the background of this case and give you some history. And there are 2 audio recordings that I would like to play because I think Your Honor needs to hear those as well. This defendant worked with a young lady named Savannah Neighbors at a local law firm. The defendant was an investigator at the law firm, and while there, he told Savannah Neighbors that he was going to, the 22-year-old paralegal who worked at the law firm, he told her that he was going to run for sheriff, and when he did, and when he won, he was going to hire her to be his personal assistant. He told her that he would be in touch with her when that day came, and sure enough, he did file to run for sheriff in 2016, mounted a campaign. There were 3 contenders for the office on the GOP side of the ticket. Ultimately, at the end of June, after a runoff, the defendant was successful and prevailed in the runoff and beat the incumbent sheriff, Sheriff Loftus.
This is 2016?
Yes, sir, 2016. And so with no opposition on the other side of the ballot, no Democrat had filed, there were no other candidates running for the office. By the end of the runoff, it was virtually assured by the end of June that the defendant was going to be elected in the general election in November, absent some sort of write-in campaign. The next day he called, or very shortly the next day or the day after, he called Savannah Neighbors and told her that he had told her that he was going to hire her, he wanted to hire her, he wanted to talk to her. They met. He told her that he would hire her and double her pay. At this point, she had left the law firm and was now working with the Child Protective Services. I think in DSS, she was doing some child protective work for the Department of Social Services, I believe. But he told her, I'll double your pay. I want you to come and work for me as my personal assistant. And she tried to get some clarity on what the job would actually entail, but he didn't really have a lot of details. He said, I'll be in touch with you to let you know. They spoke again, I believe, in August, and eventually she agreed that she would come on board. She attended some command staff meetings with existing command staff in the sheriff's office through the fall. I believe in September, October, and November, there were several meetings with the captains and the major and so forth at the sheriff's office. She took part in those and took notes for Mr. Lewis. And ultimately, in December of 2016, he hired her, the county of Greenville, not the sheriff's office, because he wasn't the sheriff yet, but the county of Greenville hired her in the position of a personal or administrative assistant to be, so to speak, for the upcoming, soon-to-be installed Sheriff Will Lewis. She worked, I think, from December 5th forward in that capacity until his swearing in on January the 3rd. There was a sort of a fake swearing in, like a private swearing in that was done at the Poinsett Club in December. And that was the first time she got some kind of sense that something might be amiss, because the next day or shortly after the evening event, he told her she looked stunning and gorgeous in her dress, and so forth. And it should be noted that Ms. Neighbors, again, I think I told you, is a 22-year-old young lady, an attractive young lady. She started work on the 3rd. Her salary was $62,000 when she was hired, which was approximately what lieutenants who had been with the sheriff's office for 20 years were making. It was a salary that to all appearances of people in the sheriff's office was out of proportion to her age and experience level in the criminal justice system. She was given a brand new Ford Explorer, a private parking space in the back. She had a computer and a laptop and an iPhone. And she went to work within a few days. They had her fitted for a bulletproof vest and set her up with that. Over the next month or two, he would take her to various events that were sort of unique and special. They took her to the firing range and let her shoot a .50 caliber gun. I think she went with SWAT and shot a machine gun. She went to a meeting at BMW at his invitation. It was supposed to be a business meeting, but when they got there, they actually had tickets to the BMW high performance driving track that's there, which is a very unique and special event. She enjoyed perks and privileges from her position that were unique in the sheriff's office. In mid-February, Ms. Neighbors she had been having some marital difficulties, and in mid-February these marital difficulties were unrelated to her job, unrelated to Mr. Lewis. But in mid-February, she informed him. On February 15th, she separated from her husband, and on February 16th, she told the sheriff that she was separated. He had made it clear to her that he wanted to know everything about her. If there was something going on in her life, given their high-profile situation, he needed to know everything about her, and if there was something significant happening, he needed to know about it. The other thing that's, I think, important to note, throughout this time period, he was making it clear to the other people in the sheriff's office that she was off limits. She should not be approached. Obviously, she is an attractive young woman working in a department that is predominantly male, and Mr. Lewis made it clear through several mediums that Savannah Neighbors was off limits to the other deputies and the other people working in the office. The night that she told him, they were walking out of the sheriff's office, and she was going home, and he was leaving as well. And he turned around and said, I need you to talk to me. Get in the car, and I'm going to see my father at the hospital. He took her to the hospital, grilled her about details of her relationship with her husband that were inappropriate and started to make her feel uncomfortable. She went home after visiting briefly at the hospital, and later that same evening, she gets a call from Mr. Lewis, and this is several hours, like 2 or 3 hours after she's told him that she's separated from her husband. And this is the first time she hears that there's going to be a budget trip out of town, that they're going to Charlotte, North Carolina, or Atlanta. They're not sure. Does she have a preference? She says no. He says, well, we're going to go out of town. I want you to come with me. We're going to be heading out to Charlotte then, and we're just going to get out of town a little bit so we can talk about the budget, and that some county administrators are going to be going with us, in addition to the Chief Deputy Marcus Davenport with the Sheriff's Office. He'll be attending as well. The meeting was set for March the 7th through the 9th in Charlotte. They arrived on the 7th in Charlotte at the Hyatt Place Hotel. And as they were unpacking their bags from the back of the car, Mr. Lewis reached into his bag and took out a bottle of liquor and gave it to her and said, put this in your bag. I don't need to be seen carrying this into the hotel. I'll come get it from your room later on. They went into the hotel, checked into their room, saw Mr. Davenport there, met with some county administrators. It should also be noted this is the first time in the budget director of the sheriff's office experience that there's ever been any out-of-town budget discussions for the sheriff's office. She's attended them all for 34 years. But they went out of town for these 2 days. They checked into their hotel. They went downstairs, met up with all the other attendees, started having some drinks in the hotel bar, some appetizers that they ordered, and drank until about 11 o'clock at the bar. And then they went out on the town to an Irish pub where a couple of rounds of shots and some drinks were ordered. They got back in somewhat late. As they went back to their rooms, Ms. Neighbors and the defendant were the last two people off of the elevator, and he told her, I need to come to your room to get that bottle. And this was well after midnight, maybe coming on 1 o'clock in the morning. They had a fair amount to drink. She says that he came into the room, walked straight in, got the bottle, and said, let's have a nightcap, and poured 2 drinks for her. He put his feet up on the table, sat down in the recliner rather, and grabbed a remote, turned on the TV, and started drinking his drink. He handed her a hotel glass that was 2/3 or so full of brown liquor. She's not sure, thinks it might be bourbon. And started talking to her about the problems that he was having with his wife and how his wife and he had difficulties. And woe is me, I'm just in this terrible situation in my marriage. We're not having relations. My life is so hard. At some point he went over and sat, and this discussion went on for over an hour. She's trying to deflect and end the conversation. She's young. She doesn't know what's going on. He comes over, sits down next to her, puts his arm around her. At some point, she remembers he kissed her, and at this point, things began to get fuzzy for her. She blacked out, does not know what happened next. When she came to, he was on top of her and engaging in intercourse with her, which she does not remember how they got from the couch to the bed, how her clothes got off, or what took place. And that would be what her testimony was. And he asked her, do you want me to finish? And of course, she's said I was delirious, I didn't know what. He's like, she said yes. Some short time later, he suggested that they leave, go down to his room. They slept for a couple of hours. At some point in the early morning, she made her way back up to her room. She doesn't remember the trip to his room. She doesn't remember coming back. And was sick the next morning when she woke up, took a shower, was not able to join everybody until later in the morning. She says that she had some conversation with him late in the morning. He offered to get her coffee, which he did. There was some exchange between them about getting coffee. He brought her some coffee. They had some short meetings that day regarding the budget. And then later on, they went and took naps in their rooms, and then got up and went to dinner and out again and had more drinks that evening. At some point, the defendant left the group and disappeared, saying he had to go to CVS.
What?
To CVS pharmacy. He was gone for some period of time. When he came back and joined them, they continued to drink. They stayed out very late. As they were walking back to the hotel, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small tube of lubricant, sexual lubricant, and held it up and showed it to her and said, your room or mine? She said neither. He sensed that she was upset, perhaps about the night before. Of course, the night before was a blur to her, and she didn't know. At this point, she's confused. She doesn't know. She's blaming herself. She doesn't know what took place, so she's confused. And he's the boss, and she doesn't quite know what to do. But he senses something and says, well, we need to talk about this, so come up to my room. There's some conversation up in his room. She manages to get away and get to the elevator. He's following her down the hallway. She gets away and gets back down to her room and stays in her room, goes to bed. At some point in the middle of the night, she gets a phone call from him or some kind of communication from him where he's knocking on the door. She wakes up. He wants to come into the room to talk to her. She doesn't know what to do. Again, he's the boss. She opens the door. He says, he pours his heart out about his many problems and says, I swear I won't lay a hand on you. Please give me another chance. I just need someplace I can rest. Can I lay down on your bed and go to sleep? She reluctantly agrees. Everything seems to be fine. She wakes up some time later and finds that he has slipped his hands inside of her vagina, his fingers inside of her vagina. Again, confusion. She doesn't quite know what to do and how to deal with this situation. This is the morning they're leaving. They get up, pack up their rooms, and leave. He says, what happened in Charlotte stays in Charlotte. We don't need to talk about this outside of Charlotte. I missed one point that I think is important. He had told her previously that he wasn't telling his wife that she was going to Charlotte, and she felt like she told him that's not appropriate. And he said, well, we've been fighting. This is just one more thing for us to fight about, and I can't deal with it. So I'm not going to tell her. And there were other folks that he had mentioned that this should be kept secret. Over the next 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, there were multiple different incidents where he would talk, she would reject him and try to push back and set boundaries, and he would encroach on those boundaries, and when she remained firm, he would get angry with her and would punish her at work, exclude her from events and that sort of thing, not allow her to go with him on trips, not allow him to go with him to crime scenes and other things that had been fulfilling in her job. So he was emotionally punishing her for rejecting him. She began to get more and more concerned. There were times, a couple of events, where she felt like he was following her, or he knew where she was and what she was doing. She just had this sense, but she couldn't confirm it. She didn't know for sure. At some point, he had loaned her a pressure washer to clean her house. Maybe we're getting ready to list. And the arrangement was made to come pick the pressure washer up. He was going to come back to her house to pick this pressure washer up, and she did not want to be there. She was separated from her husband, so she was alone. She did not want to be at the house alone when he arrived. So he told, she made arrangements with a neighbor. When this man shows up to pick up the pressure washer, you can open my garage and let him take the pressure washer. And then she called him and said, I won't be home, but come by and pick it up. My neighbor will help you. And she went to a Chick-fil-A some distance away from her home, ordered something, and sat there waiting for him to call. It was around the time he was supposed to be coming by to get it. He called her and said, where are you? And she said, well, I ran to get something to eat, but you don't need me. My neighbor will let you in to get the pressure washer. And he said, I know you're at the Chick-fil-A, aren't you? And she looked up in the rear view, and his car was right behind her. So at this point, she is in panic. He's following her. He knows where she's at. And he says, go on home. I'll just follow you. And so she begins to panic. She speaks with her sister on the ride home, and her sister says, this is not right. This is scary behavior. You need to do something to protect yourself. When you get out of the car, turn your phone on and hit the record buttons. Record everything he says. There's a conversation that's in the driveway of her home. It starts there. And then there's a conversation after he leaves with the pressure washer. He calls her back on the telephone and continues the conversation. And the conversation is about a trip he wants to take her on to Reno, Nevada, to some sort of law enforcement training school thing that's in Reno. She recorded the conversation in the driveway, and she recorded the conversation while they were driving. It takes about 35, 40 minutes to listen to it, but we can play it now for your honor. I think it's important. It gives you the context of this whole picture. What I'm trying to lay out for the court is the crime that he is accused of committing, and the crime that he's indicted for, is using public money for facilitating an adulterous relationship. And this whole story, everything that transpired, he groomed her, gave her an exorbitant salary, gave her perks that were completely out of range for her abilities and her experience, and the only purpose of it was to establish and create an ongoing sexual relationship. and she resisted. She did not want that. And I think that the tapes, the conversation that they had back and forth, reveal not only what was going on in her mind and her attempts to push him off and set boundaries, but at the same time preserve her job, because she's trying to protect her. She enjoys her job. She enjoys many aspects of it. But she's trying to basically tell him, no, I'm not interested, but in doing it in such a way that isn't going to result in her losing her job. So I would ask the court if you would indulge us to play these tapes. I think it's important for your Honor to have an understanding of what we're talking about and why this is important, why the complete picture is important.
All right, go ahead.
Can you hear that, Your Honor? Let's see, I might be able to play it better off of mine.
It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I mean, it just seems like maybe that's later on you probably regret it. But I mean, hell. I guess if I found somebody decent, yeah,
Your Honor, I forgot, we have a transcript that was prepared, which might make it easier for your court. This is the one that is prepared in the civil case. And
Yeah.
it may be disputed if you want to follow along and
I would have this transcript was actually prepared by Ms. Neighbor. It's not an official court report. With that caveat, for purposes of this hearing, I would let the court review it.
Okay. You've seen it?
Oh, yes, I've seen it. I've listened to the tapes too.
All right.
But just with the caveat that it was not an official.
I understand.
Right, so-
But authenticity is.
Correct. And I kind of think that the tape actually gives more flavor to it than the cold transcript too.
yeah, I just did. I think the tape is fairly clear. You should be able to hear it, but in case there are words you miss, if you follow along.
All right, I'll try. I'll do my best.
You want to start over again? Would that be easier?
Well, how far did you get? Because I didn't pick up very much.
You're 27 seconds in. We're not too far in. We can start again, and that way you can.
I heard something like, that's what I'm doing, pushing on.
I mean, I need a 6 foot tall blonde. You know what I mean?
Why?
Something totally different.
Well, I don't think that far in yet. It's not covered. Not totally non-repairable, so don't go that far yet.
No, it's not. It's not totally nothing's totally non-repairable. I just think it's probably, it's over the horizon. I mean, it's inevitable. I mean, my personality, you know, her personality, it's inevitable. It's going to happen. I mean, but it's okay. I mean, it is what it is. Deal with it for sure.
Well, I'm good. Yes, no. I don't like that. I've already had a
see how things work out. See what you say. I don't want to go, if I'm going out Friday night, I'm going to get it. I'm going to get my truck. So, and I'll come by and take Drew lives over here. I'll come by and pick Drew up. Come by and pick you up. And we pack it at Brian and I live right behind me. So we're gonna ride together or whatever. And you can drive south.
No, if we're going out on Monday. No, I wouldn't have no fees and stuff. I do not like, I am very adamant about drinking and driving, and I wouldn't drink and drive.
Well, that's why I'm probably gonna come back and because we go out, we're gonna try.
I don't have one of those too. So then I picture all four of them like, yeah!
Let's just we'll see. We'll try out very Friday. We'll see how it goes.
All right, that sounds good.
You want to get a ring up? You want to do that?
If I got a chance, yeah. I want to go where I go.
Yeah, as far as the ring accommodations and that kind of stuff, with county people, the company. I'm fine with it, but if county's only going to pay for one room, are you fine? Of course.
Oh, yeah, that can work.
Do what?
I thought, yeah, that can work. That's too risky. I feel like if somebody were to find that out, I don't know.
Anybody will find out because everybody's going to be out there for South Carolina. I mean, nobody's going to find out. That's the whole point. But again, I wouldn't do it if it's risky. I mean, I'll make it through it ahead of time. But that's kind of the thing. If you're not comfortable going in one room,
I mean, if they're not going to pay for 2 rooms, it's not going to go. But
well, I'm probably not going to go.
you don't think I'll pay for 2?
I doubt it. But again, that's what I'm saying. I don't want to put you. That's kind of spot something to put you in.
Yeah.
You know how you feel about that?
We'll figure it out.
Well, I mean, really, there's no need to figure it out. I mean, there's nothing to figure out. I mean, I can get 2 plane tickets, but I don't know pay for 2 rooms. So,
I just feel like that's a really bad idea. And
really bad idea for me and you, or really bad idea for me?
really bad idea for I mean, what if the public found that out? I mean, that's what they all say. I'm sure that's what Bill Clinton said too. Well, I'm just saying, that's way too risky. I'll go with you if there's 2 rooms, but I'm not going to go to everything. Like, on paper, you know what I mean? I'm not like, I'm not going to go and there only be 1 room and somebody finds out we both win. Like,
I understand exactly what you're saying. Everybody can find out. I mean, this is not going to happen. I mean, I get it. I do understand what your concerns are.
yeah, I just don't think it's a good idea.
Well, I'll get to yours. I'll get to yours. See what we can do from there. I just got to figure out.
Yeah. When are you thinking?
I was thinking you.
I'm trying, she wants me and my mom to come on a long weekend in May, and I'm trying to talk her into the week of June because of like Wilson is on that whole week, and I could stay all week. So, but I think she's got a wedding that week or something. I don't know. So it just depends. That's all I talked my mom about last night at dinner, and she said she's gonna look at her schedule and see what she can do. Morning's gonna look at her stuff and see what she can do. All right, I'll see you in the morning. Be careful.
That was the conversation that took place in the driveway. Shortly after this conversation, there was a telephone call between Mr. Lewis and Ms. Neighbors, which was also recorded by Ms. Neighbors on another phone. She put it on speakerphone.
Was there, that was in the house?
This was the call you just...
Second.
The second call, she's at her home on her phone. He's in his car driving his pressure washer back to his father's house.
Does she have a cricket in her house?
No, this was outside in the driveway, so they were outside when the crickets were chirping. Those were exterior crickets you were hearing, Judge.
You understand what I'm saying? I do. I mean, I get it. I mean, you just look out for me, and I understand that. And I appreciate it.
Okay.
I mean, I don't miss procedures in any way. And I understand what you're saying. I know that, Justin, I know that there's not going to be anything to it. You know what I mean? I know, but I also understand what you're saying. So I called B, and I was like, hey, I said, listen, I said, thinking about bringing Savannah out to the conference. She said, yeah, I figured you probably would. I said, county's not going to cover 2 rooms if I bring her out there. He said, no. He said, so, he said, just get, he said, see if they got a room, get Savannah a room with a double bed. He said, because my rooms aren't full. He said, just get 1 room. He said, you'll be fine. He said, you can stay in my room, you know, or whatever. And he said, basically we'll list it as 2 rooms. There'll be a comp room plus that room. Does that make sense?
No.
Like their business will comp us a room.
Oh, okay. All right.
So if they're like on paper, we will have 2 rooms, but we will pay for 1. Does that make sense at all?
Yes. Yes.
Yes, so we will have 2 rooms on paper. I will be staying in 1 room, and you will be staying in another room. Not that anybody's going to do it anyway, because there's just going to be 2 tickets that go out. And of course, if you and I get the big ass fight going out there, then I can stay in front of the group. But, you know, I mean, he's staying away from the conference. He's not staying at the conference hotel, which is even better, because, quite frankly, I mean, you know, that's certified as anyway. So, but and he says within this like a block away from the conference that is going to be selling staying in the room. So, I mean, you know, everything will be straight, is what I'm saying. Everything will be straight, squared away.
Okay.
But I don't want you to miss out, quite honestly. I will go out. I mean, if you're not going to go, I mean, there's really, I love Brandon. I mean, there's no fun to be had in going out there. I mean, there's just no fun for me. So.
No, I mean, that sounds fun. I just didn't want it to be, you know, I just didn't want you to take it the wrong way, and I didn't know if when you left that you were, like, frustrated or anything, so I just wanted to clear that up.
No, did you actually think about it after I left?
Yeah. I just don't want us to go backwards, that's all.
Don't. I understand that.
think it's a good idea. You know, if I told you what you wanted to hear, I would be like, yeah, let's just do it. But I didn't.
Well, I mean, the probability of us staying in the same room is probably pretty high. You do understand that, though, right?
Kind of, sort of.
Okay. That's cool.
What do you mean that's cool? Don't start acting like this.
Start like what? Remember? You sort of understand. Here's my question. All right, here's my question is this. If we get out there and we've got 2 rooms, are you on paper? We've got 2 rooms. But we don't stay in the same room. Is that comfortable or not comfortable for you?
I mean,
I'm going to go with not comfortable just based on the bars.
I don't think it's a good idea. I don't think it's a good idea.
Okay. All right.
I don't want you to get all mad and pissy on me for another 2 weeks. I'm just saying, I like the way things are lately, and I want them to stay this way. And you do too. So, let's not move backwards.
Okay. Fair enough.
What do you mean?
Fair enough. I mean, that's it. I mean, I've got my answer. I mean, that's okay. I'm not. I mean, I've got my answer. So, I mean, that's good. If Brandon's room will work, if it's not a single bed, he's going to check on it. If his room's a single bed, then we're not going to be able to go. So, I mean, that's it. I mean, because I don't want to put you in an uncomfortable spot. I don't want to do that. Because I don't, that's not the deal. We don't consider it uncomfortable spot.
Okay. Well, we'll figure it out.
No, I mean, that's it. I mean, it's bigger. I mean, that's it. If it comes back and it's a single bed, I mean, it's not going to work. So, I mean, that's as much as figuring out. And he's going to text me and let me know. So,
I mean, because even then, Brandon would be like, wait a second, like, what do you mean? Like,
so Brandon, you still understand that they, I don't think, that for us,
being as close as we are is one thing, but if somebody says the sheriff and his assistant shared a hotel room, that's like a whole different thing, Will.
yeah, I get what you're saying from your perspective, but to Brandon, first off, Brandon would never say anything to anybody ever, period. Like, he would not even mention that you were even dating.
I know, but, and you may be right, you may totally be right, but I don't want to take any chances. Like, you are a political figure, whether you want to be or not, and I'm not going to be the one to screw this up. For you, for me, more for you, and one person knowing that we shared a room together is like too much. Does that make sense?
I mean, to you it does, yes. Yeah, to you it does. And that's all that matters. I mean, to you it makes sense, and that's all that matters. So, I mean, that's it. I mean, it's something. If it makes sense to you, then that's fine. I mean, that's it. So, I mean, if he's got a couple, then, I can stay with him and we can go. If he doesn't have a double, then, we won't go. I mean, that's that easy. I mean, this is not a fucking jigsaw puzzle or thought of business. This is simply, it's just simply that. If Brandon has a double room and it will be comped to the county, then we will have one other room that we can get, and that will be your room. is if he doesn't have a double bed, then there's no
Okay.
I mean, it's just, that's not, I mean, I just, but can I explain to you at least why it's making sense to you?
Yes.
And why it would not be different to us?
Yes.
Because we, like, for us, there's nothing about, like, if you and I stayed in a room together, there is nothing about that would be odd to Brandon or any other, 90% of the other SWAT team members throughout the country. Because we've all had female partners somewhere along the way, like on the road, and your female partner, you would like test in front of your female partner, like you would change clothes in front of your female partner, she would change clothes in front of you. I mean, we had like 2 SWAT team members, well, one SWAT team member who was a female, Diane Sotomayor, and she was just blazing hot. I mean, and she would like literally drop down to her underwear in front of us and change those SWAT call. I mean, that's like, women in law enforcement don't get offended, and if a woman and a guy stayed in the same room, none of us would think that way. Like, that's just not how we think. Now, Ty is a little bit different with her thought process, but Ty is different because of her husband. Prior to being married to Brian, who is uber jealous, she would have never thought twice about it either. I mean, I can tell you stories about Tom McConnell and Tom Miller when they were beat partners. I mean, that was, Tom and Ty were beat partners for a long time.
I gotcha.
So, I mean, so for us, it's not anything any different. But
Except we're not partners. Except I'm not a cop.
I get it, but you are to everybody pretty much. I mean, you're in the family. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, to Brandon and everybody else, I mean, if a state trooper stopped you that knew me, and recognized you and knew who you were, then you would get the same courtesy as every other cop. I mean, it just, like, you have those courtesies now. I mean, I know it's a little difficult for you to understand, but you do.
I can see what you're saying, but you see my perspective, like.
No, I see your perspective, and that's why I said it the way I did.
Okay.
Was because you said, does that make sense? I said, to you.
Okay.
Because to you it does make sense.
And to most of the citizens of Greenville County, like Lynn Ballard, like, that would give them exactly what they want. You know what I mean? Like.
I'm not. That would actually take some looking into for them, quite frankly, they would never do that. I mean, nor does need to take time off your schedule when you're out. I mean, there's no paper trail for any of this. And I mean, even if you went with me, it's like Ty and I going down to sheriff's school together. It's more of a hassle for the two of us to be staying in the same hotel room, or same hotel, period, guy, girl, from the same agency that know each other, than anything else. So we just don't tell people shit. Like, Ty will tell you, I'm sure, that she will say, the less people know, the better off they are. But people don't need to know. That's why I don't tell people anything. So, I mean, but again, I'm not trying to, this conversation is not meant to change your mind. This doesn't change anything. I'm just telling you that, comfortable with anything that we're doing or that I'm doing.
Right.
And, I don't want that. But at the same time, I don't want you to be uncomfortable with anything I'm doing, but at the same time, I'm kind of trying to feel out that zone again a little bit. Because, there is a level there apparently that, so, I'm trying to kind of feel it out at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't want you to, I don't want to say, hey, Savannah, do you want to go to Hawaii? And you say, I'm not going to turn a trip down to Hawaii, but the only reason you're going is because it's Hawaii. You know what I mean? I don't want you to just want to go because of the destination.
Okay.
And that's
Why do you want me to go?
because you want to go.
Right.
No, Savannah, I want you to go because, I just want us to give a roll around with it. Just me and you, nobody else. I want time away. I want to see myself. And I want us to just be able to sit around and drink on the beach and on company time.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, that's. I want you to go because you want to go, and not just for the destination. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
I want you to go because you want to go. You're cool with hanging out with me. If you're not,
I'm definitely cool with hanging out with you, and yes.
but listen to me. If you're not cool with that, because you know how I am. So, if you're not cool with that and you're uncomfortable with it, then...
What do you mean by you know how I am?
Well, you know how I was in Charlotte. You know how I am. I'll go out, I'll turn a few up, I'll get silly, whatever. But, I guess what I'm saying is you've seen it all,
Mm-hmm.
So that's what it is. If that's not cool, then that's okay. But I need to know that. So when stuff comes up, I'm not trying to plan, for Savannah to go with everybody else. Because they said it all.
Yeah.
Am I making any sense here?
Yeah.
So again, that's kind of where we get back to the whole. You got all the, you've seen it. If that's not comfortable with you, then that's cool. But I need to know that.
I just don't understand how you and Meredith can be best friends and have no, y'all don't have sex or anything, y'all don't have, an intimate relationship, but y'all are best friends. Why can't we...
Hang on 1 second. Just hang on a second, okay?
Okay.
Don't hang on.
Okay.
Hey. So what did you say on here?
I just don't understand why y'all can be best friends without an intimate relationship, but we can't have the relationship that we've had for the past week without, some sort of expectation of sex and Reno. You know what I mean?
There's not an expectation. And, I now I'm kind of starting to get the whole thing here. So, it's starting to make a I understand what you're saying. There's no expectation of status.
I mean, you just said that I shouldn't want to come just because it's the destination. I should want to come because I want to hang out with you, and I know how you get, and I know how you are, and so I know what's going to happen. Like, that's what you just said.
No, I didn't say you know what's going to happen. I said you know what's going to happen at all.
Okay.
Yeah, I got you. I'm tracking. I understand. It makes perfect sense. So, I get it. I understand.
What do you mean you understand?
I understand. Now I understand. I understand where you're coming from. And I get it. And it makes sense. So, that's cool. For the record, the reason Mary and I can remain best friends is because we floated around so much that it didn't really happen. And we just can't. I don't know. I can't explain it.
So are we going to be able to have the relationship that we have right now? Like, ongoing? Like how it's been in these past 2 weeks?
Yeah, I guess.
What do you mean, good?
Tell me what would be the problem?
Because last time we had this conversation, I came to work the next day and everything changed.
Hey, boss, you open the garage? Open that garage, I'm gonna put it in there. I'll close it back before I go. The pressure washer in there. Unless you want to put it in there. Alright, I'll close it up before I leave. No, so I'm fine with whatever you want. However you want to move forward. Whatever you want to do. Friendship wise.
I just want things to be exactly how they've been the past 2 weeks.
Okay.
I think we've been on the same wavelength. We can trust each other. We're working well together. Everything's been great.
Yep. Then you were probably going to be in a position where we're going to be fine. Yes, there'll be some addendums, amendments to what my original expectations were. I'm not talking about sex.
What are you talking about?
Talking about just the relationship in general and the work relationship there. But it's fine.
What do you mean by that?
There'll be some changes. We'll have to make some changes.
What kind of changes do you have to make? I mean, things have been great these past 2 weeks.
They have. But it's just future things. So I'm not going to take you places with me. I'm not going to take you places.
What do you mean by that?
Just what I said exactly.
Like you're not going to take me to meetings and stuff, or?
I'll be glad to take you to meetings. That's what your job is. That's what you're there to do. I trust you. I don't have any issues with trusting you. And that's fine. I'm totally fine with that.
Okay.
But there are just places that I'm just not going to take.
Okay.
That's just it. So I don't want it to be uncomfortable. I don't want you to go anywhere. I'd love you to stay. We're back to that.
Exactly. I don't want to be back to that. Please don't let us be back to that.
Trust you.
I trust you.
So there's it.
Okay.
So we're not going to be places together.
Okay.
So that's just because if something does happen,
That is totally fine. If that is what you need, like, that's fine. That's perfectly fine. If you don't, that's fine.
Is that a bad? That's fine.
No, I'm saying, no, I totally understand, like, that it's perfectly fine. If we can still have the relationship we have and be how it's been, and the only addendum is that we can't go on trips together, then that is totally understandable.
Okay. All right.
Alright, well, I'm gonna get in the shower and get everything ready for the morning, and I will, what time did we decide?
Listen, you do whatever you need to do in the morning. I don't know that we really decided the time. So, you do whatever you have to do, and seriously, if you don't want to go to this funeral more, if you want to if you want to knock off for the morning until we get back, I'm okay with that. I mean, you don't have to go to the funeral. I mean, it's not, I get that. I mean, that's okay. I mean, it's a little confusing and the way things are. I mean, if you don't want to go, that's okay.
What do you mean the way things are?
Just the way things are. I mean, it's just see, here we go.
What do you mean the way things are?
See, that's what I'm talking about, right back down that road. The way things are, don't question what I'm saying. We're literally heading right back down that road. You do realize that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is absolutely where we're going.
Yeah.
You gotta understand that this is not me. I did not start this. You know that. You've got to at least be honest about that. I did not start this.
I don't know how I would have started it, Will. Like,
Okay.
everything's perfectly freaking fine until,
It is, Savannah. Everything is fine. You're absolutely right. Everything is fine.
then why did you just say you don't have to come in the morning because of the way things are? What do you mean by that?
Savannah. That's the point for right there. That's what I'm talking about. That's what put us where we are, right there.
Well, explain yourself so that I don't have to ask.
What I was talking about, Savannah, was the fact that it is mass chaos and mass confusion. It was 11, then it was 11:30, then it was 10, then it was, now everybody's leaving at 9 o'clock in the morning to go to this thing. We're leaving. It's your question. You asked the question before I left your house. It's 2 hours ahead of time. That what we're going to do for 2 hours.
Do you have to leave with everybody else?
So I think it would be very, very wise if I left with everybody else.
Okay.
I mean, you really just takes me if I did not ride with the sheriff's office.
Okay. Okay. You're right.
So, that's what I'm talking about. If that's what you want to know, that's the way things are. That's what I was talking about.
Okay.
But you immediately jumped.
I said no. I said, what do you mean the way things are? Like, I need to know what you meant by that, and then you think I'm talking about something else, and then I think I'm talking about something else because you've got me so confused.
So then, I'm not trying to confuse you all. All right? Are you going to be there in the morning or not?
I don't know.
Okay. Then there's your answer. If you're not there when we leave, if you're not going to be there before we go, then nobody's really going to be up in admin. Most of us are going to be gone. So
Jackie and Sally and everybody else are staying.
exactly. You're welcome to stay there if you would like, or you can come in later. The choice is completely yours. If you would like for me to do it, I will text you when I'm on the way back to the city. If that would be easier for you.
That's fine.
This is not the way that this shit is going to fucking happen. It's not going to work this way. This is not the direct. I will absolutely not assume responsibility for this conversation. I'm not going to do it. I absolutely fucking refuse. to go. If you're not, then that's fine. I'll see you when I get in.
All right,
Okay.
sounds good.
Good night.
Your Honor, what followed over the next, this conversation on the phone and the one preceding it took place on the evening of April the 18th, 2017. On the 19th of April, the next day, she did not go to work. She called. She was very upset. You heard at the very end of the tape she was crying. She was upset because he was mad at her. There was a decision on her part to go see her sister in Florida. She called in and said that she would not be into work. There transpired over the next couple of days a series of phone calls between Savannah neighbors and the defendant, all of which she recorded, and they basically consist of a series of emotional manipulation, him getting upset with her, her trying to, come to terms with what's happening and discussing how they could move forward, and the likelihood, the reality that they couldn't move forward, and that her job was going to end at the sheriff's office. Ultimately, on the 24th of April, she went in and tendered her resignation, put in 2 weeks' notice, which she told her she did not have to work, and that was her last day at the sheriff's office of actually showing up there. She left, went home. After that, she had an extended period of depression and went through some significant issues through the summer months. Ultimately, she spoke to a lawyer about what took place and sued the defendant and the sheriff's office and the county of Greenville for sexual harassment. And
She did file a lawsuit.
she did file a lawsuit. It was filed in civil court initially in common pleas, and I believe ultimately was removed to federal court. It was settled. The lawsuit was resolved by settlement.
It was settled.
I'm sorry?
It was settled.
Yes, sir. It was settled. After the lawsuit was filed, but before it was settled and during litigation, there was some discovery, extensive discovery took place between the parties. Shortly after the lawsuit was filed, obviously it was a subject of significant public interest locally. The defendant scheduled and held a press conference in which he acknowledged that he did have sex with Savannah neighbors. He apologized for it. Ultimately, in the lawsuit, I think he admitted that one occasion, not two. But there was some information that came out during the civil suit as well. Your Honor heard the tape, and I think one thing I also mentioned, I may have said this before, but Ms. Neighbors gave a deposition in the civil case, and she described what took place. Now, she doesn't allege that he hit her and threw her down on the bed and forcibly raped her. What her accounting of what took place is that basically she blacked out and she woke up and found him on top of her having sex with him. And she does not know how that happened or what transpired between the time when he kissed her and the time she woke up and found him on top of her. And then again, the next night, they were asleep. He slept on the other side of the bed, agreed, promised not to touch her, woke up the next morning, and he's got his fingers inside of her. Again, that would be what she reports of it. But it's clear from, and that's what she said in her civil suit, so, and she's already given that sworn testimony. It's clear from the tape, Your Honor, he says to her at one point, in the second tape on the telephone call, when he's trying to describe and calibrate her expectations of what would happen in Reno. You know how I am, how I was in Charlotte. I tip a few back. I get silly. You've seen it all. You've seen it. At another point. He's talking about Charlotte in this. How can she give, first of all, how could she testify at all and not tell the truth about what took place in the room? He admitted that they had sex, but there's no way she can testify and not include what actually took place in the room. It is intimately bound up in the case. It is the story of the case. And I know Mr. Wise says there is no allegation of rape, but we did not say that he raped her. If he was going to be charged with that, it would have to be in Charlotte. We don't have jurisdiction over a crime that occurs in Mecklenburg County, North Carolina. However, the adultery allegations, adultery is the sexual relations with someone who is not your spouse. Voluntary sexual relations with somebody who is not your spouse. And the voluntary part only has to be on the part of one. It did not have to be that she volunteered, that both parties were volunteering. So his voluntary decision to engage in sex with her when she was drunk or unconscious constitutes adultery. And the circumstances of that are so wrapped into this case that there is no effective way to tell the story. You cannot surgically remove this aspect of it. And these tapes won't make sense. You know how I was in Charlotte. The jury needs to know what she understood that to mean when they're listening to this. Your Honor, the tapes are damning evidence, and they refer and require the context of what took place in Charlotte and how this relationship unfolded and what Reno meant to her, what the promise of a trip to Reno meant to her can't be understood without her being able to explain that. So res gestae is, I believe, the theory under which this matter is introduced. Gestae analysis. I'm handing up the case State versus Williams, and I will also hand up to the court, as I locate it, State versus President. Over there. Here it is. I'd cite first to Presler, which sort of goes back to the language I would read would be under head notes 7, 8, 9, and 10, Your Honor. The res gestae theory recognizes that evidence of other bad acts may be an integral part of the crime with which the defendant is charged, or may be needed to aid the fact finder in understanding the context in which the crime occurred. Our Supreme Court discussed res gestae theory in State versus Adams at 322 South Carolina 114, and I am citing from State versus Presler, P. Par, E.S.L.A.R. 364 South Carolina 466. And in that case of State versus Adams, the Supreme Court said, one of the accepted bases for the admissibility of evidence of other crimes arises when such evidence furnishes part of the context of the crime, or is necessary to a full presentation of the case, or is so intimately connected with and explanatory of the crime charged against the defendant, and is so much a part of the setting of the case and its environment that its proof is appropriate in order to complete the story of the crime on trial by proving its immediate context or the res gestae, or the uncharged offense is so linked together in point of time and circumstances with the crime charged that one cannot be fully shown without proving the other, and thus is part of the res gestae of the crime charge. Your Honor, if this is in res gestae, the indictment alleges a course of conduct from January 3rd, the day he was sworn in, until April 24th. This event occurred in early morning hours of March 8th and early morning hours of March 9th. And that is within the time frame of the indictment. The acts themselves were adulterous, which is alleged in the indictment. And the state is entitled to prove the entire case and its context and give a full and complete accounting of the evidence to the jury so that they can understand what this man did in its complete context. And without this, the state's case, I don't know how Savannah Neighbors can tell the story of Will Lewis. I don't know how the state can present the case against him without including all the details of what transpired in Charlotte, because it is the sun around which the rest of the evidence orbits.
Wow.
Yeah, first of all, to go back to the first ground that Charlotte's not relevant.
Okay,
If Mr. Lewis had gone to Charlotte and picked up some woman in a bar and having a one-night affair with her in Charlotte, that would not be admissible for misconduct in South Carolina because really no misconduct occurred because there was no abuse of the office.
That's correct.
All right. Secondly, in this case, the trip to Charlotte was planned with the county administrator, so there's no abuse of funds in Charlotte, again. So what happened in Charlotte is simply what happened in Charlotte. I don't think it's admissible in this case here. Secondly, the example given by Solicitor Brackett earlier, if Mr. Lewis had gone to Las Vegas, Nevada, and gambled $10,000 and half of it was on the county credit card, that credit card was going to be paid in South Carolina. So it had a nexus to this state that would give this state jurisdiction for abuse of misconduct in office charge. Secondly, into the second ground, to further add to what I think is the confusion, first of all, I think it's, to me at least, it's clear that that tape doesn't sound like some woman who was raped. In her deposition, she says that she did not realize she was raped until she went to therapy. In her deposition, she said that she did not realize she was drugged until months later. And that's how I know that I passed out, because I was damn drugged. There is not a scintilla of evidence of any drugs being placed in any of her drinks. And to allow her to get on the stand and testify 2 months after the fact, I now know I was raped, and 2 months after the fact, I now know I was drugged, is simply too prejudicial to be probative. It's too prejudicial and not probative.
That's a trial issue that you would certainly have to object to, perhaps would be sustained.
Right, and that's what I'm trying to get ahead of time so we don't have to raise it at trial. And I'm glad I did, because if we raise this at trial, it would be spent a half a day
But when you're talking about realizing something after a therapeutic session, then I mean, doesn't that call into credibility issues with the witness?
I think
Isn't that a jury issue?
Well, I think it can be, but when if this court determines that the mere mention of that is so prejudicial, that it's more prejudicial than probative, I think it doesn't go to a credibility issue, because I think this court has the initial burden of establishing, is this evidence even credible enough to get to the jury?
All right.
If I may, Your Honor, briefly? Just
Yeah.
briefly. Mr. Wise said that in the example of a credit card is going to be paid in South Carolina, the thousands of dollars that were spent for hotels and whatnot, food, all came from South Carolina. That's the first thing, including credit card expenditures. But the second thing is we don't intend, I'm not in the habit of trying to raise issues that I can't prove. And I don't know, and neither does Ms. Neighbors, whether she was drugged. She just knows she blacked out. And since she can't say that, I've cautioned her. There will be no suggestion that she was roofied or anything of the sort. She will just say exactly what I related to the court. She was sitting there, they'd been out having drinks, he gave her a drink, she drank from the drink, and then things started to get fuzzy, and she blacked out. She woke up, he was on top of her. Now, there will be no suggestion that he slipped her a Mickey or did anything of the sort, but I think, as I said, this is a straightforward issue as far as part of the res gesta.
All right, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I will read these two cases, any other cases that you wish for me to do. I'll be here all week. I'll let you know tomorrow. Let me consider these rest back to bedside cases, and I'll email you my response by tomorrow.
Yes, sir.
John, if I may, I would like
Yes,
to
sir.
hand, it's mentioned in one of the briefs, and I can hand up the court a copy, but my copy is kind of marked up, but that's not a big deal.
Brief of what?
It deals with, what misconduct in office is in the New Jersey case of, state of New Jersey versus Coleman.
You're talking about when the brief you
Yes,
sit.
one of the briefs.
When the the issue of the indictments, the question.
Yes.
Indictments was, I've got that.
Okay, it's cited in that. I may have handed up a copy to the court then too.
Well, anyway, why don't you just email me that citation?
I sure
All
will.
right, good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Your Honor. Oh, Your Honor, I'm sorry. There were a couple of other matters I mentioned in chambers that I wanted to put on the record.
Oh, yeah.
My capable assistant, Ms. Robinson, reminded me. First, the matter of reciprocal discovery. I believe Mr. Wise indicated he may have one document for me. And also I had requested any information about additional motions, and I believe there are no more forthcoming. This is the last significant legal issue to be resolved. Okay. And then the only other thing I wanted to mention, Your Honor, there has been some recent news coverage of tapes that have been leaked to news outlets, conversations that have taken place. And I wanted the court, and I want it to be on the record, because in case there is an allegation later on that is prejudicial, and that it inflamed the jury pool or whatever, I am aware, and I want the court to be aware, that I was made aware of a tape involving an attempt to discuss a resolution of this matter a year or two ago involving Mr. Bannister that was in Greenville News recently. That was made aware to me. An attorney I know contacted me and said that he had been contacted by a certain Lance Sheik, who he did not know. My attorney friend did not know Mr. Sheik. And Mr. Sheik had spoken to him and said, what do you know about Kevin Brackett? And I have this tape that bears on the Lewis case, and I think that it's of interest. It's a conversation that took place between Mr. Lewis and some attorneys, and I think it may have something to do with this case, and it might be important. What should I do? And my attorney friend was somewhat mystified, did not know Mr. Sheik, did not know what he was trying to accomplish. He said, I'll call Kevin and I'll let him know. I rejected. I have no interest in listening to Mr. Lewis's conversations with attorneys. They may be privileged, and I have no interest in knowing what the content of those are. But I know that Mr. Sheik possessed that tape. It was not the state of South Carolina. I am not in possession of that tape. I do not have it. But we have not leaked any materials to the press. That would be inflammatory and could create unnecessary publicity and would be inappropriate. So I have no knowledge of how that came to be in possession of me.
And Your Honor, for the record too, I became aware of that yesterday, and first time I was aware of it. I don't think I even have that tape in my possession, since Mr. Brackett said he didn't give it to me in the discovery. I checked with Mr. Lewis. I'm quite confident that it did not come from outside either. Apparently there's been a copy of that tape out in a few hands.
Well, from the press report I read yesterday, sounds to me like it has no bearing on this case.
That's one reason I haven't listened to it.
All right. Can you get me your board here by Friday?
I can
We will, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, just to make sure I'm on the same line, I have the materials from
The concurring opinion there is really